want 50% of the inheritance, Jared said, leaning back in his chair with a slow, confident smirk that looked like he had practiced it many times before. Plus equity in your architecture firm. It's only fair. The words didn't just sit in the air, they echoed, lightly bouncing off the glass walls of the modern Chicago courtroom. But after that, everything went completely still. The silence that followed felt louder than his voice, like the whole room was holding its breath, waiting to see how I would react. Jared casually adjusted the lapel of his expensive Italian suit, the same suit I had paid for, and glanced around as if he expected approval, maybe even admiration, as if people would nod and agree with him. I didn't react. I didn't gasp. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, staring at him from across the table, trying to understand how someone could stand so confidently on something so absurd. It almost felt unreal, like I was watching a stranger instead of the man I had once married. $3.4 million. That was the amount my grandmother had left me. A lifetime of her hard work, her decisions, her sacrifices, and somehow, Jared believed he deserved half of it. Not because he earned it, not because he built anything with me, but because, in his mind, his so-called lifestyle brand had helped shape my success. The confidence in his face wasn't just arrogance, it was delusion. Next to me, my lawyer. Richard shifted slightly, his body tightening as if he was ready to step in and shut this down immediately. But I gently placed my hand on his arm, stopping him before he could speak. This wasn't the moment for interruption. This wasn't the moment for arguments. This was a moment to watch. Because what Jared was showing right now wasn't just greed. It was something deeper, something uglier. He wasn't just asking for money, he truly believed he was entitled to it. And as I looked at him sitting there, glowing under the cold, artificial courtroom lights, so sure of himself, so comfortable, it finally became clear to me. The man I married was never my partner. He was a parasite. And now, he had grown too big to ignore. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing where everyone is joining from. It makes this story feel like we're all experiencing it together. Now, let me take you back, because to understand how I ended up sitting in that courtroom, staring across at a man trying to tear apart everything I built, you need to understand what I do and who I was before all of this. I'm a restoration architect. My job is to take things that are old, broken, sometimes forgotten, and bring them back to life. I study structures that look fine on the outside, but are quietly failing inside. I find the weak points, the hidden damage, the cracks no one else notices. And then I rebuild them, stronger than before. I give buildings a second chance. I spend my days working with steel, concrete, and history-saving legacies from collapsing into dust. But there's something ironic about this kind of work. When you spend your whole life building safety for others, you sometimes forget to protect yourself. You forget to check your own foundation. You forget that you might be the one standing in the rain. I met Jared 5 years ago at a gallery opening. I remember that night clearly, not because it was special, but because I was tired, completely drained. I stood in the corner with a glass of lukewarm water, barely paying attention to anything around me. My mind wasn't on art or people, it was on structure, on a floating staircase across the room, calculating in my head whether it was truly stable. I wasn't looking for love that night. I was looking for an exit. And somehow, that's exactly when he found me. At the time, it felt like coincidence. Like one of those unexpected moments life throws at you. But looking back now, it wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Jared didn't just approach me randomly. He chose me. He had done his homework. He knew who I was, what I did, and more importantly, where I stood. He knew my firm had just landed the St. Regis contract. He knew I was successful. And he knew I was alone. He didn't use cheesy lines or try to impress me in obvious ways. Instead, He walked up to me and asked about the cantilever stress on the staircase I had been staring at. He spoke my language, and that's how it started. For the next 6 months, it didn't feel like dating, it felt like alignment. Like I had finally met someone who understood me completely. Someone who saw the world the way I did. But now I know the truth. He wasn't aligning with me, he was mirroring me. There's a kind of blindness that's strong. Independent women often carry. When you're used to handling everything alone, even the smallest help feels powerful. When someone offers to carry just a little bit of your weight, it feels like relief, like change, like something new. But what I didn't see back then was the pattern forming. What I thought was love was actually something else, something quieter, something calculated. He studied me. He noticed the cracks I didn't even know I had. He saw that I was tired of always being in control, so he took charge of small decisions. He saw my insecurity about working too much, so he praised my ambition, called me a visionary while slowly convincing me that I needed him to handle the rest of life. He didn't fix my weaknesses. He filled them with something temporary, something that looked strong but wasn't. Like cheap material hidden behind polished walls. He told me he was a consultant for tech startups. It sounded impressive, but vague enough that I never questioned it too deeply. He dressed well, drove a decent car, wore watches that looked expensive. Later, I would learn the truth. Most of it wasn't real, it was all just part of the image. I remember the night he proposed. We were in Paris, a trip he suggested, but one I paid for because his money was tied up. He looked at me with those carefully practiced eyes and said he didn't just want to be my husband. He wanted to be my sanctuary. And I believed him. I said yes, because while I could recognize rot in wood and weakness in concrete, I had no idea how to recognize it in a person. I thought I was building something real, but in reality, I was opening the door for something to tear it all down. When the call came from the estate lawyer, I was standing at a construction site, wearing a hard hat and shouting over loud machines. My grandmother had passed away months earlier, but her assets were complicated, and everything had taken time. When the lawyer told me the final amount, $3.4 million, plus her brownstone, I didn't feel excitement. I felt weight, responsibility. When I told Jared that night, his reaction was immediate. Not quiet, not respectful, hungry. 3.4, he whispered, his eyes lighting up. Angela, do you know what we can do with this? I calmly told him my plans to invest back into the firm, improve systems, grow the team. He waved it off. That's small thinking, he said. You need to think bigger. Our brand. The next morning, he quit his job. No discussion. No warning. Just came home, dropped his badge, and announced he was now fully focused on us. I'll handle the money, the connections, the lifestyle, he said, smiling as he opened champagne. You just keep drawing your little blueprints. That phrase bothered me, but I ignored it. I thought maybe he was helping. That feeling didn't last long. Within weeks, money started disappearing. Expensive purchases, risky investments, big promises. Then came the lost. $40,000-$5,000 gone overnight. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He dismissed me. You don't understand the future, he said casually. That's when something inside me shifted. And a few weeks later, when I found the pitch deck in my own office, the one with his name on it, building a company that copied mine, using my people, my money, that shift became something solid. Cold. Clear. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a takeover. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply started planning. I called Richard. And from that moment on, everything changed. That night, I went home like nothing was wrong. I cooked dinner. I smiled. I listened as Jared talked about his plans, his ideas, his vision. I think we're really close to a breakthrough, babe, he said, pouring himself a glass of my vintage red. I can feel it. I can feel it too, I said, sipping my water. Under the table, My phone buzzed with a notification from the security app I had installed on his laptop. While he was in the shower, it was a log of his keystrokes. I was watching him build his own coffin, one lie at a time. The courtroom air was so still, I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Jared sat across from me, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from profound ignorance. His lawyer, a man who clearly charged by the syllable, stood up to make his closing argument. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing grandly towards Jared. "While my client may not have contributed financially in the traditional sense, his intangible contributions, his networking, his lifestyle curation, his brand were the catalyst for Miss Angela's success. He was the wind beneath her wings." I saw the judge, a woman with eyes like flint, suppress a grimace. When it was my turn, I did not make a speech. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked to the bench. I placed a single thick envelope on the judge's desk. "What is this?" the judge asked. "Evidence, Your Honor," Richard said from beside me, "of a prenuptial agreement signed 5 years ago stipulating total separation of assets." Jared laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "That old thing? I did not even read it. It is void duress or whatever." The judge opened the envelope. She pulled out the prenup, her eyes scanning the signatures. Then she pulled out the second document I had included. It was a printout from my home security system, a log of digital activity from our shared home network dated 3 weeks prior. "And this?" the judge asked, holding up the log. "That," Richard said, his voice slicing through the room, "is record of Mr. Jared attempting to access my client's private digital vault. Specifically, the folder labeled legal documents. He tried 27 different password combinations. He knew the prenup existed, Your Honor. He was trying to find it and delete it." Jared's smirk vanished. It did not fade. It was deleted. His face went slack. He looked at his lawyer, then at me, then at the judge. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I had not just protected myself. I had baited a trap, and he had walked right into it. The judge looked at Jared over the rim of her glasses. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she let out a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was far more devastating. It was a scoff. "Mr. Jared," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "it appears your lifestyle curation did not include basic cybersecurity. Your Honor." Jared's lawyer stammered. "This evidence is inadmissible. My client." "Your client?" the judge interrupted. Her voice, sharp as glass, committed digital trespassing. "But let us return to the matter of assets." She turned back to the prenup. Jared was still frozen, his mouth slightly open, a look of pure, unadulterated cognitive dissonance on his face. It was not just fear. It was a system failure. His brain, wired to believe he was the protagonist of every story, could not compute a reality where he was the villain who got caught. He looked like a computer trying to divide by 0. According to Clause 14, the judge read, "All debts incurred individually during the marriage remain the sole responsibility of the individual." She picked up another stack of papers from the envelope, the credit card statements I had compiled. "Mr. Jared," she said, looking over her glasses, "you have accumulated $15,000 in personal debt, the leased luxury vehicle, the failed crypto investments, the credit cards maxed out on lifestyle expenses. You assumed these would be absorbed by the marital estate?" Jared nodded dumbly. "We were partners, not according to this," she said, tapping the prenup. "This court rules that the prenuptial agreement is valid. Miss Angela retains 100% of her inheritance and her business equity, and you, sir, retain 100% of your debt." She banged the gavel. The sound was like a gunshot in a library. Case closed. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. Jared slumped in his chair, the golden boy facade dissolving into gray, panicked reality. He was not a partner. He was not a co-founder. He was just a man with a leased car he could not afford and a debt he could not pay. As I stood up to leave, I looked at him one last time. He did not look back. He was staring at the table, his world collapsing inward. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor, a rhythm of absolute, unshakable freedom. The collapse of Jared's empire was swift and public. When the court transcripts were released, because Richard, in his infinite wisdom, ensured they were part of the public record, Jared's personal brand disintegrated. The investors he had courted for his spin-off firm vanished. The junior architects he tried to poach came back to me apologizing profusely, claiming they were manipulated. I did not fire them, but I did not trust them either. Trust, once broken, requires a complete teardown to rebuild. Jared moved back in with his parents. His leased SUV was repossessed. The last I heard, he was trying to sell consulting services on LinkedIn, but his reputation was radioactive. He sent me a few emails, long rambling screeds about how I had ruined his potential, but I never replied. I just forwarded them to Richard and let the legal system handle the rest. I did not keep the money he tried to steal. I did not want it. It felt tainted, like timber infested with termites. Instead, I took the exact amount he had demanded, plus the value of the debt I had avoided. And I created something new. The Eleanor Scholarship. It was not just a fund. It was a lifeline. I designed it specifically for women escaping financial abuse, providing them with the resources to rebuild their lives from the ground up. Legal aid, housing, education. I named it after my grandmother because she taught me that a legacy is not just what you leave behind. It is what you build while you are still here. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood on the roof of a new project site, the wind whipping my hair. I looked out at the city, at the skyline I was helping to shape. I was not just an architect anymore. I was a sewer. I had taken the poison Jared tried to feed me and turned it into fertilizer for a garden he would never be allowed to enter. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who built shelters for everyone but herself. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that the most important structure you will ever build is your own self-worth. And this time, the foundation was solid. If you believe that protecting your peace is the highest form of self-love, hit that like button and share this story. Someone out there needs to know they can walk away